There's a weight that comes with silence, a heaviness you carry when you fail to speak up for yourself. For years, I let others dictate my life, shape my decisions, and trample over my boundaries without protest. I told myself it was easier this way, less confrontational, more peaceful. But peace built on suppression isn't peace, it's imprisonment. Tonight, I want to confess the moments I stayed silent, the times I swallowed my truth instead of speaking it. Because now, looking back, I realize how much those silences cost me. They stole opportunities, relationships, even pieces of who I am. And though it's too late to change some things, maybe sharing this will help me finally let go. It started early, long before I understood what standing up for myself truly meant. As a child, I learned quickly that confrontation often led to pain, physical or emotional. When the neighborhood bully took my toys or teased me mercilessly, I didn't fight back. Instead, I retreated into silence, convincing myself that walking away was noble, mature even. Back then, it felt like survival. But those small acts of surrender planted seeds of doubt within me. Each time I stayed quiet, I reinforced the belief that my voice didn't matter. By the time I grew older, silence had become second nature, a reflex rather than a choice. By the time I entered the workforce, I'd mastered the art of compliance. At first, taking on extra projects seemed like a way to prove myself, to show I was capable, dependable, indispensable. But soon, it became clear that my willingness to say yes made me a target. Colleagues dumped their responsibilities onto me. Managers expected me to work late without acknowledgement, and clients demanded unreasonable deadlines. Every request was framed as urgent, every task critical. Yet, I never pushed back. I feared being labeled difficult or uncooperative, so I nodded, smiled, and kept working until exhaustion consumed me. Looking back, I see how much respect I sacrificed in exchange for approval. Respect from others, and from myself. Friendships are supposed to uplift you, not drain you. Mine wasn't like that. Not entirely. There was laughter, sure, and shared memories I still cherish. But there was also manipulation, subtle yet persistent. He'd criticize my choices, belittle my ambitions, and guilt-trip me into doing things I didn't want to do. "You're lucky to have me," he'd say, implying no one else would tolerate me. And so I stayed silent, swallowing insults and excuses because I feared losing the only person who claimed to care. Deep down, though, resentment festered. I hated myself for staying, but I couldn't imagine leaving. That friendship defined me for years, until it destroyed me. Then there was her, the woman who saw potential in me when I couldn't see it myself. She challenged me, encouraged me to set boundaries, to value my worth. But I was too afraid to embrace the changes she inspired. When she confronted me about my passivity, I dismissed her concerns, deflecting blame onto circumstances beyond my control. Eventually, she gave up, moving on to someone who appreciated her strength. I wanted to stop her, to explain how much she meant to me, but pride and fear held me back. Instead, I wrote her a letter, a confession of gratitude and regret, but never sent it. By the time I found the courage to act, the train had already left the station, literally and figuratively. Family dynamics are complicated, especially when your voice is consistently drowned out. Growing up, I rarely disagreed with my parents. Their expectations were law, their opinions gospel. Even as an adult, I deferred to their authority, fearing conflict would fracture our fragile bond. During one particularly volatile dinner, they debated major life decisions on my behalf, career paths, financial plans, personal goals, as if I weren't sitting right there. I opened my mouth to interject, to assert my independence, but nothing came out. Silence settled over me like a shroud. Later, alone in my room, anger boiled over, not at them, but at myself. Why hadn't I spoken up? Why did I always let them decide for me? The turning point came unexpectedly, not during a dramatic confrontation, but in a moment of quiet reflection. Sitting on that park bench, I realized I'd spent my entire life waiting for permission to exist fully. Permission to pursue dreams, to express emotions, to defend my boundaries. But no one was going to give it to me. I had to claim it for myself. Writing in my journal helped me untangle years of suppressed thoughts and feelings. Page after page, I confronted the patterns of avoidance, the excuses I'd used to justify my silence. It wasn't easy. Facing the truth never is, but it was necessary. For the first time, I understood that standing up for myself wasn't selfish, it was survival.
Taking that first step was terrifying. I invited close friends over, determined to practice asserting myself in a safe environment. At first, my voice wavered, unsure and hesitant. But as I continued, something shifted. I spoke honestly about my struggles, my regrets, my aspirations. To my surprise, they listened, not just politely, but attentively. Some admitted they'd noticed my reluctance to stand up for myself, and expressed pride in seeing me take ownership of my voice. That night marked the beginning of a transformation. Though I still stumbled occasionally, I reminded myself that progress isn't perfection, it's effort. Rebuilding relationships required courage, especially with those who'd taken advantage of my silence. When I reached out to my former friend, I braced myself for rejection or ridicule. But instead, we met halfway, both acknowledging the harm we'd caused each other. I apologized for enabling his behavior, and he admitted fault for exploiting my kindness. It wasn't an overnight fix, but it was a start. Over time, we rebuilt trust, setting healthier boundaries and fostering mutual respect. Healing isn't linear, but it's worth the effort. Today, I walk taller, speak louder, and live authentically. Regret will always linger for missed opportunities, fractured relationships, lost time, but it no longer defines me. Instead, it motivates me to honor my voice, to advocate for myself without apology. Life is too short to stay silent, too precious to waste on pleasing others at the expense of your soul. As I stroll through this park, feeling the warmth of sunlight on my skin, I remind myself that growth isn't about erasing mistakes, it's about learning from them. Thank you for listening to my story.